Hello, my name is Michele, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. Wow, I cannot believe that we are a year into this podcast journey of Profit is a Choice. I'm not sure if you all heard my beginnings in podcasting, but I started investigating having a podcast back in 2016. And at that time, I determined that the amount of time and effort and energy that it was going to take to do it and to do it well was, I guess, just resources that I didn't have available. And so I shelved it. And then in 2018, that this whole burning in me to do it came back up again. And I realized that I would be able to create sustainable time in my calendar to create and produce a podcast. And now here we are a year later. On this episode today, we're going to do a year of review and highlights. There's so much goodness that has happened this year, and I was reminded of the value of the podcast as I looked back. So hang with me and enjoy. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. This has been an amazing year in so many ways, and I've learned a lot in the process. So again, on today's episode, we're going to focus on sharing some of the highlights and some of the lessons learned. When I first started this podcast, I wondered how I was going to find people to talk with, which now seems a bit silly a year in. But you see, it's interesting because when I was in school, I was an honor roll student. I made excellent grades. I excelled at everything, even talking. And so the only negative on my report card at any point was that I talked too much in class. And now I'm so very thankful for that. My family gives me a hard time all the time, no matter where we go. They're like, you always meet a friend. You always meet somebody to talk to. You always have something in common with the person standing beside you in line. And honestly, this gift of gab has allowed me the opportunity to uncover the beauty of relationships, choices, and outcomes. And I really can't imagine having a podcast and hating to talk, because that would be a difficult thing. A few years ago, Sylvia Guglielmo, who you may recognize from the So Much More podcast, kept talking about Gretchen Rubin's 4 tendencies. And she talked about it a lot. And it had really made an impact on her life. And so I started looking into it and quickly realized I'm a questioner. Innately, I question most things. I am always motivated to uncover what's behind a decision and a choice, and then to get to the heart of what somebody was either thinking or experiencing at the time. And so to me, this is the best way to tie together the choices that we make and then to really own them. So even before I knew I was a questioner, I've always done this. I was the kid who wanted to understand why. And it really is kind of funny in our home because I birthed a son just like me. And it's kind of the family joke, but since the time he was 2 years old, could barely speak and walk and ask questions, he started with why. And every question was why. You would give an answer, and the next question was, well, why? And you would answer it, and then it was, well, why again? And he asked why so much that the only way to stop the interrogation was for both of us to just go into pure exhaustion or to shut down. And if you've ever tried to explain why to a 2-year-old, you understand at some point there are just no words to even explain the why in a way that they can understand. But even now, as an adult, he and I can jockey back and forth on a why conversation. In my coaching practice, asking questions to understand is considered part of the foundational work. And so it really made sense for me to bring that to this podcast. And I just am so very thankful to all the people that have asked to be on the podcast. And honestly, out of all of this, there's only been one person who said no. And that no ended up with a maybe later attached to the end. And I really just want to say how thankful I am to my first few guests, Sylvia Guglielmo, Luann Nagara, Jennifer Dawn, Mike McAllowitz, and Kate Grunke. 4 of those people have their own podcasts, and they understood what I was getting ready to do. And one of them is my business coach, who has been giving me unwavering support for the last 5 years. And all of them supported me as I began, and they agreed to come on and help me kick it off. And for their support and encouragement and cheering as I began this journey, I am so very thankful. Before I began the podcast, I had a business plan for the podcast. And I know for some of you that, is probably not a shocker, but I sat down and I created a mission statement and a vision. I thought about who my ideal client was. I wrote all of that out. So if you're listening, you're on my ideal client list. I also went through and thought about where I wanted it to go and what I wanted it to do and accomplish, the tone that I wanted to set. And, I also realized this is not the first business that I've created, that businesses have to have room to breathe. And I wanted to create a business plan for the podcast that had room to breathe, which means that I didn't create it so tightly and hold it so tightly that it couldn't kind of grow into its own. And I believe that the podcast is still growing into its own. So I intentionally chose, some of you have asked me about this, why I don't have a big sponsorship. I actually intentionally chose not to have any sponsors in the first year other than Scarlet Thread Consulting. And I did that because I wanted the podcast to find its own voice in its own way without direction from the invested dollars of another company. Now, that's not to slam anybody else who's made a different choice. This was just the choice for my business that I made. Will that always be the case? Maybe, maybe not. But right now, the choice has served me well. And so I want to share with you one of the biggest things that I have learned from my guest on the podcast. And the first one is going to be courage, just plain and simple. It takes courage to start a business, courage to run and maintain it, and courage to share the journey with those around you, and then even more courage to share it with thousands on a podcast that you don't know. When we put our information out into the world, we don't know who's on the other side of our microphone listening. We don't know who has the speakers turned up. We don't know sometimes when a small word or a phrase or just a sharing of an experience impacts someone in an extremely personal way. And each of my guests this year have trusted me to share their insights into their stories and to honor their hard work and dedication and to be open with their struggle. And this is something that I don't take lightly because I've shared my story and I know how tender the telling might sometimes be. Life and business is hard. We say that a lot, but it really is. And it's also beautiful, even in the mess. And so I want to thank my guests for sharing the mess and the beauty of what they're creating. As I look back over the list of those who've shared, and we have seriously covered a lot of topics from finances to therapy to teams and hiring and firing, processes and systems, mindsets, having a pivot in our business or offerings, and everything in between. The topics that keep coming up are fear, shame, and confidence. They really took center stage this past year. And I am convinced that we probably could not exhaust how much these three feelings and mindsets can wreak havoc on our success daily unless we attend to them, until we capture those thoughts and really consider the impact that they're having. And so I want to encourage you, if you've not heard or if you need a refresher, go back to episode 1 where we talk about fear, episode 5 where we focus on shame, and episode 52 where we really break down confidence. There are so many other episodes that I've put out this past year that talk about these as an element, but those three really focus. Okay, so while I've learned something from every episode, I went all the way back to the beginning and started looking back over all of my notes from every one of the guests that I've had in the past year. And every one of them said something that has really stuck in my mind or really been an aha for me. And I know that it probably was for many of you because you've sent me emails and stories. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to tell you who the person I was interviewing was and what comment they said that really just impacted me. And you're going to see I'm going to start at the very beginning and work my way through the podcast. So Get ready. Pen and paper might be great here just to jot down. This is almost like the highlight reel. So it's just a couple of one-liners that every person said that was like, oh, wow. So this is just a whole listing of some major truth bombs. All right, here we go. Let's get started. Sealed Guglielmo says, why am I so afraid of making mistakes? And this is a question we all need to answer, right? I mean, come on, if we all talk about that, why are we afraid of making mistakes? I'm thankful that Seal brought that up in the fear conversation. But that fear of making a mistake, of not being seen as perfect, can really stop us. Luann Nagara said, excellence is a decision. It is understanding the power of deciding it's my choice and it's up to me. Well, you know, I'm all about making choices, and profit is a choice. And Luann and I completely see eye to eye on that. Excellence is a decision. Profit is a decision. It all is a decision. Jennifer Dawn says, profits come from serving well. Serving well. Who are you serving well? If we are serving our community and providing impact, then we are going to be profitable. Mike Michalowicz said, total revenue is responsibility and profit is sustainability. Okay, that is a massive truth bomb. I am so frustrated in general, just getting on my soapbox for a minute, at those who believe that you're only a business if you make X amount of dollars in revenues. That's just junk. Honestly, what it comes down to is how much profits do you have? And I'm talking like, to begin, even just gross profit. That's what it means to run a company, is how much do you have to run the company? And so when you think about total revenue, as Mike indicated, that's a lot of responsibility, because that's a lot of product to manage, potentially employees to manage. But having that gross profit, having that be a fair and reasonable and healthy percentage of the income coming in, that's what actually allows your company to be sustainable, not just your ability to sell. Kate Grunke shared, confused customers do not come back. Keep a consistent message so disconnects do not happen. And that is something we need to think about no matter what we're doing, whether we're having a conversation with the client at the beginning, if we are blogging, if we're networking, if we're newslettering, if we're emailing, all the time, we have to keep the confusion at bay. Christy Lott, an accountant, says, as small business owners, we should check in with our accountants at least 3 times a year. Absolutely. 3 to 4 times. If your accountant's not trying to be open and able to work with you, then you need a new accountant. Rochelle Plett says, it is important to be physically and mentally in the moment. If it's just one or the other, there is still emptiness. Wow. I think I've shared with you that there was a time when I was so wrapped up in my business and I'd missed a goal at my son's soccer game, and I'm sitting in the stands and he says to me later, Mom, did you see that? And I kind of looked at him and, was trying to figure out how to answer. And he said, Mom, sometimes he said it would just be better if you physically weren't here. He said, instead of being here and not really being here. And that's exactly what he was saying. They were still in emptiness. And it was almost more painful for me to physically be there and mentally not in the game. So wherever you are, try to be there. Corey and Anthea Click said, it's not about where you are, it's about where you're going. You tell me no, and I'm going to tell you I can do it. No means move on to the next opportunity. Nancy Ganzikoffer says, it is our job to express what the value is for a client and take them on the journey to see it, feel it, and visualize the outcome. That is so true. As business owners, we are to set, create, and embrace the value, and then help our customers see the same thing. Tracy Taylor said in our online coaching, where we did financials backwards, in the busiest times is when the need is greater to do the majority of the marketing. So much truth in that. We've said that multiple times on the podcast, and certainly in a coaching situation. We get super busy and overwhelmed, and we start backing off on our marketing, thinking we don't need it. And that's when we need it, so that it is creating the pipeline for 3, 6, or 9 months out. Valerie Leonard, a financial advisor, said, it is extremely important to start with the priorities and work backwards to set the financials in line to create the budget. We have the ownership and the decision-making with our budget. Please, 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 everybody, tell me you're creating a budget for your business. If you're not, you got to go check out my Understanding Your Financials course that teaches you how to understand your financials and do it. But having a budget is imperative to being able to manage your money well. And I'm thankful to Valerie for reminding us of that. Lauren Davenport Ember says, the important thing is to know when the project is going off the rails and when to reel it back in. Trial and error is the best teacher. Cut the losses, realign expectations, and move on. Sarah Daniele shares, it's important to not shelter the stress and paint the picture that it's always easy and fun. It might start out as a side hustle and you're hustling, right? Can you all identify with that? I mean, even just the podcast, if I were to act like it was all easy and fun from the very beginning, it would not paint a true picture. And there is some part of it that is easy and some parts of it that are fun, but it's still a heck of a lot of work. Sarah Lynn Brennan says this very short sentence with huge impact. It is important to value yourself. Janelle Deck shared that profitability has to be in the equation right off the bat, which includes learning to do forecasting and then being able to present it to investors to fund the business if necessary. If we don't understand our financials up, down, left, right, it is going to be very difficult to know when things are going off the rails financially and being able to forecast what's coming. That's one of the first things I ask my clients to do is we start forecasting out. What do we think the year is going to look like? What is the next month, 3 months, 6 months? I mean, forget trying to forecast out 5-10 years if you can't forecast out for one. Ann K. Johnson says, I look at it at achieving maximum efficiency by thinking about how I would train an employee. That's good. Like if you're really trying to be efficient, how would you want your employee to do it? Because sometimes if you really step back and think about it, we're willing to get distracted, do a couple of extra steps. We're willing to put up with the hassle, but we would not want to have our employee put up with the hassle or pay them for the hassle. We want to pay for it to be efficient and quick. So when you're trying to determine if what you're doing, the process that you have or system that you have is efficient, think about how you would train an employee. Renee Carmen shared, it's important for me to empower my clients and create a strong partnership between them and myself. I think that is super important as we are working with clients to realize we're on the same side of the table. Like this is not adversarial. Our goal is not to be across from them. It's to be beside them working towards the same goal. Heather Gillette shares, integrity is critical in this industry because it's based on relationships. Diane Preston said, the time spent in taking courses and going to conferences and learning is valuable, and it empowers me to be able to charge what I need to charge and to be okay with it. That is great because, you know, sometimes we don't even increase our rates year to year to year. And we don't even think about the fact that all of that educational work that we have done, whether it's webinars or conferences or books, all of that makes us a better business person, a better designer, a better workroom, better at our craft than we were the year before. And so really thinking about that and owning that value is huge. This one got me, another really just very short sentence, but Lindsay Cheek said, being unclear is being unkind. I'm going to read that again. Being unclear is being unkind. So the challenge to us is to think about where are we being unclear, therefore unkind to ourselves, to our employees or staff or contractors, to our vendors, to our clients, to anyone who comes into contact with us. And it takes bravery sometimes to be clear and to be kind. Matt Maloof says we should be working 60 to 70% in your zone of genius. First, that means we have to know what our zone of genius is. And if we know what it is, we need to make sure that we are watching our time so that the majority of the work that we do is in our zone of genius. So we should not be spending the majority of our time doing common work that we could hire others to do, or that doesn't allow us to work at our highest and best. Okay, so first identify your zone of genius and then try to structure your time and your day so that 60 to 70% of your time is in that zone. Cynthia Blaskachik says, there must be intentionality to be profitable in an upholstery shop. And I would go so far as saying there must be intentionality to be profitable in all types of businesses. Rachel Moriarty says, be open to loosening up from implementing so many boundaries. Isn't that true? Sometimes we create boundaries just to create them, rules and all of this. You can't, you shouldn't, you must not, you could not. And truthfully, sometimes we need to let that go just a little bit to see what opportunities are out there. Peter Shankman, when he was talking about ADHD on the podcast, said, live your life 30 minutes early, which is always be prepared and be ready early. And then you never feel like you're running behind everything. Stacy Brown Randall says, referrals have two things, a personal connection and an identified need. I love to send referral emails, which say, hey, Michele, I'd like to introduce you to Donna. Donna needs this and you have the solution. I hope you two can connect. So something that when the other recipient gets it, she can do something with the email. I love how Stacy also talks about the difference between referrals and word of mouth buzz. So if you don't know the difference, that'd be a great episode to check out. Peter Lang, another accountant, says, don't spend a large sum of money until you talk to your trusted advisor. If you ask before spending, you will be in a better position. Nicole Heimer, talking all things branding, says, the biggest problem is the lack of clear messaging. So true. If we don't write the story that we want people to read, they're going to write their own based on what they see. So clear messaging is so important. Michele Seekings, when we talked about art, you don't need a Picasso in your collection for it to be a true art collection. I learned in that podcast that I am an art collector, and I didn't even know that I was. So if you don't think you're an art collector, go listen to it. You might just be as well. Jacqueline Edwards, your blog content should support your business goals. Annette Faber, when we were talking about Profit First, once you owe the IRS, you never forget that feeling. Okay, I can tell you a big amen to that because I've been there, done that. And I work with a lot of businesses that are small all the way up to multi-million-dollar businesses that have, we'll just say, had a few run-ins with the IRS. And that is not a feeling that you forget. And I love how she said that. Susan Woodcock says, there are times when the customer is at fault, but we need to take responsibility as well. Natalie Riddell said, when we tend to be perfectionist, we make ourselves our own victims. Whoa, we do. We make out a victim mentality because everything has to be perfect. Kind of goes all the way back to that comment about fear of making a mistake. Tracy Resnahan on implementing Profit First in her business, she said, I learned to love running the business. Listen, if you don't love the numbers and you don't love the business and you don't love the power of the numbers, you have got to reach out to me. You've got to go to Scarlet Thread Consulting and check out what we have. Because if you're going to own the business, I want you to enjoy it. I want you to love it and I want you to understand it. And that's what the podcast and my entire company is created to do. Scott Beebe says, your vision story is never any more than 90 to 95% complete. And that just goes back and reiterates my comment about creating my business plan and yet giving the podcast room to breathe. Your vision story needs room to breathe, 5 to 10%. Darren Veresami made the comment, your talent is a matter of your own nature and nurture. And this was, one of the things that we were talking about when we were really digging into StrengthsFinder. Marie Kerman on her Profit First story said, Profit First is not scary. Once you do it, it becomes a habit. If you've not checked out Profit First, please, you have to do that. Amy Fleury says, do not discount your community when it comes to exposure. So often we're out here trying to market and social media, have a presence and do all these things nationally and everywhere else. And that's great. But don't forget your local community as you're continuing to build your business. Joanne Leonard Weary said, when you quit loving what you're doing, think about how you can evolve and change what you're doing so that you can recapture the joy of the process. So just because it's the way you started your business doesn't mean it's got to be the way the business stays. Pivot, change, move, and do what you need to do to recapture the joy. Christy Lott even shared in hers that she had a joy in building this really big firm, and then she had the joy of reducing it back down and making it small again. Many of you have had those types of opportunities in your business. Embrace it. Julian Taylor says, if I know the answer and I can help someone, why not make it easy for them? I mean, seriously, isn't that why we're in business, right? To provide the solution to a problem that our ideal client has. Make peace with providing the solution. Hope Arbery says, what we do is so important because we are impacting people's lives in their homes. And our homes are meant to be a safe place, a place of sanctuary and rest. And we don't need to underestimate the impact that we have on someone's life when we, touch their home in some way. Debbie DeFrancesco says about Profit First, just dive in and do it. It's well worth the time. We're starting to see a pattern here, right? It is so worth it. Colleen Losh, who is also my personal trainer, says, we take better care of our houses than we do our bodies. And we don't want to be dead when we reach the prosperous place. Okay, we'll just say she was probably talking to me a little bit there. But now that I'm working out consistently and taking care of myself, it is made such a big difference in how I feel. And so if you're not taking some time to care for yourself, please do that. It does impact the profitability of your business and your company. Your health, we want to be profitable with that too. Shauna Percival said, don't be afraid to ask for help. You don't have to be the expert in everything. Shauna Lynn Simon shares, people love to give us opportunities to give us exposure. Do not take on an opportunity unless it is a true benefit to your business. So good. So good. People are offering and allowing us to do things for free all day long. And, if it is truly in alignment and will create a benefit, short, medium, or long term for your business, by all means, consider taking it. But out of guilt, we shouldn't have to say yes to an opportunity that will bring us nothing. Claire Jefford says, make it a point to sit down to review the letter of agreement and expectations with your client. If we can't sit down and go over the LOA and the expectations and all of that with our client, then we need to take a step back and make peace with our process. So again, if you've got one, if you don't have one, you got to start there. But if you do have one, make sure you embrace it and you understand that creating that agreement and creating those expectations is exactly what allows you to support your client. Mark McDonough says, videos are the closest you will get to a handshake or a phone call. Vita Vygotsky says, we have to be peacefully present. Goes all the way back to the other one, right? About being intentionally there. I love that. We have to be peacefully present. Cheryl Sedeker on her Profit First journey says, Profit First shows me the adjustments I need to make, and I see it impacting my personal finances too. Kay Whitaker shares, email marketing are the emails that you utilize to move people through a buying process. You've heard me if you were on that podcast listening at all. That's something that always made me kind of nervous, was that I'm sending too many emails and people don't want to hear from me. But the people that really want to hear from me, they want to read my emails and they want to read your emails too. So if people decide that they don't want to get your emails, then they just really probably weren't your people in the first place. Angie Avard Turner says, you want to protect the things you create. That is really great advice from an attorney. And so think about how you're protecting the things that you create. Kristen Mathis on her Profit First journey. It was important for me to give permission to myself to make a change. Whoa. Sometimes we don't even give ourselves permission to make the change. Good reminder, Kristen. Monique Becker says, the emotional connection to our surroundings is absolutely necessary. So good. When we're doing design, when we're doing custom window treatments, when we're making things again for people's homes, we have emotional connections to that space. And we don't want to miss that either in our process to provide them a finished product or for any other reason. So make sure that you have the ability to help create an emotional connection. Eileen Hahn says, the difference between hiring someone who is exceptional and someone who isn't will impact your business. Okay, profitability definitely can be hindered by having the wrong people on your team. And so take the time to hire the right people. I always say you want the right people on the right bus going in the same direction, right? So right people, right butt, right seat. Everybody, if you're in a boat, we're paddling in the same direction. And when you have somebody who's pulling in a different direction, it does not help the profitability of your company. Emma Carroll Paradis and Kimberly Carroll say, you have to sometimes step back and ask, what's the purpose? Emily Moore shares, my whole purpose in doing this was not to make money. It was so my heart can be happy. That is so beautiful. If we're doing these things so that our heart can be happy and we're truly serving, as Jennifer Dawn said, profits are going to come out of that. Kat French shares, I want to keep the client happy, but I need to look out for my team as well. So true. And Courtney McLeod says, I was intentional about changing my lifestyle to match my income. Wow, all of this is so encouraging to me. I mean, just to go back and to go through, 57 comments from my guests over the years, just a quick run through. I mean, I'm almost energized again. I could just about probably replay this multiple times, even for myself. And so I want to, again, thank all of those who have participated in sharing. And I want to thank all of you who have been listening. I want to thank you for your feedback. I want to thank you for the reviews that you've left. Please keep leaving your reviews. It helps other people find it. I want to thank you for telling me what you want to hear about or telling me where you're struggling so that I can try to find people to talk about that with you. Thank you for letting me in to what's happening in your business, the good, the bad, the messy, and everything. And so now I'm going to say, where do we go from here? Our plan is to continue telling the stories, uncovering the why, encouraging the try, and then adjusting our mindset for success along the way. All of these items impact our profitability, short-term and long-term. And it's not just about the money. To change our outcome, we have to change our thinking and decision-making. I also want to just make sure I don't forget to thank my team. I have an awesome team behind me. Legal, graphics, branding, admin, editing, you name it. I do not do all of this by myself. I could not do it all by myself. And I just want to make sure that my team knows that I am super thankful for everything that they do to support me, to support Scarlet Thread Consulting, and to support Profit as a Choice. My hope is that you'll stick with us another year, that you'll continue listening, and maybe even perhaps be willing to share your own story. For those who want to be in community where we wrestle with the ins and outs of business, head over to scarletthreadconsulting.com and check out the Designers Inner Circle. We would love to offer you support on the journey of your business. Never forget, profit doesn't happen by accident.